Pai.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor and pleasure that I welcome you to this virtual debate where policymakers, ship owners and NGOs come together to discuss how maritime activities can contribute to the mitigation of climate change. Dear friends, almost a year ago, a new phrase was added to our vocabulary, the European Green Deal. The European Commission has launched an ambitious strategy which aims to make Europe the first carbon neutral continent by 2050. The Green Deal roadmap will build a set of deeply transformative policies at regional and national level across 8 key areas: increased climate ambition for 2030 and 2050, clean, affordable and secure energy, a clean and circular economy, energy and resource efficient buildings, sustainable and smart mobility, a fair, healthy and environmentally friendly farm-to-fork food system, preservation and restoration of ecosystems and biodiversity, and zero pollution for a toxic-free environment. Green Deal is basically a new growth strategy which will transform the European Union into a fair and prosperous society with a modern, resource-efficient where there will be no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. From the outset, interconnecting them with economic development. The government of Cyprus is committed to contributing to the successful implementation of the Green Deal. Towards this direction, the Council of Ministers has recently approved the governance mechanism for the implementation of the Green Deal. This mechanism involves most of the ministries of the government and focuses on the coordination of all sectoral strategies. Among the sectors that are called to contribute to decarbonisation is maritime transport. In the next few years, decarbonisation will likely change the face of the maritime economy. More change is to be expected due to digitalization and the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. This systemic change brings both threats and opportunities, which we need to properly address if we are to ensure long-term sustainability. Being a European country with a highly developed shipping sector, we have decided to organize this event to openly discuss how maritime transport can make a meaningful contribution to climate change while safeguarding its competitiveness. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Shipping Deputy Ministry for taking this initiative. I warmly thank our distinguished panelists who will share their valuable knowledge and ideas on this issue. I look forward to a fruitful outcome from this discussion. Thank you.
Πάει στον Ανδρέα. Όχι, είναι ο Ανδρέας τώρα.
Honourable Ministers, honourable Member of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it is with particular pleasure that the Office of the European Parliament in Cyprus is contributing to the organisation of today's virtual consultation. We at the European Parliament deem it part of our DNA and thus our mission to creating a conducive environment where partners and stakeholders can meet and exchange views. Allow me to outline briefly and in a chronological order the position of the European Parliament on the broader issue of the decarbonisation of maritime transport. It is an undeniable fact that the European Parliament has consistently pushed for ambitious policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in international shipping. In its resolution towards a new international climate agreement in Paris, 14 October 2015, the Parliament set out its positions before the COP21 climate change conference and called on the parties to work within the IMO towards an effective response by setting adequate targets before the end of 2016 so as to achieve the 2 degrees Celsius target. In its resolution of 25th October 2018, UN Climate Change Conference in Katowice in Poland, the COP24, the European Parliament welcomed the initial IMO strategy on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships and called on the IMO to agree rapidly on new mandatory emissions reduction measures needed to deliver on the targets. The Parliament urged the European Union and its member states to monitor the impact and implementation of the IMO agreement and to consider additional EU action to ensure that shipping emissions are reduced in line with the Paris Agreement. On 28 November 2019, the European Parliament declared a climate and environmental emergency. In a parallel resolution on the UN Climate Change Conference in Madrid, the COP 2025, underlining the slow and insufficient IMO action, the Parliament called for further EU measures to reduce maritime greenhouse gas emissions. It urged the Commission to propose the inclusion of the maritime sector in the EU emission trading scheme, the well-known ETS, and the introduction of a ship efficiency standard and a ship label. In its resolution of 15 January 2020 on the European Green Deal, the European Parliament endorsed the Commission's intentions concerning initiatives on maritime emissions, ending fuel tax exemptions, and regulating pollution imports. It defended a high level of ambition for greenhouse gas reduction, while reminding that EU measures should not undermine the international competitiveness of EU-flagged ships. Understandably, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very pertinent point to our discussion today. Agreeing that EU and international measures should go hand in hand to avoid creating double regulations, the European Parliament also affirmed that any action or lack of action at global level should not hinder the EU's ability to take more ambitious action within the EU. The European Parliament also called for a move away from the use of heavy fuel oil and for investments in new decarbonizing technologies and the development of zero emissions and green ships, while advocating the reduction of shipping speed. Lastly, on 16 September 2020, when adopting its position on the Commission's proposal to align the EU MRV regulation of 2015 with the IMO data collection system, the Parliament requested that shipping companies reduce their annual average CO2 emissions per transport unit for all their ships by at least 40% by 2030, as it is the case in the IMO initial strategy, or face penalties. In addition, the Parliament also voted to include CO2 emissions from the maritime sector in the EU ETS from 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to close my intervention by thanking very much indeed Ministers Kadiz and Dimitriadis, as well as the Honourable Member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Adamovic, for their participation in today's virtual debate. Sincere thanks also to the participating stakeholders of the shipping sector. Their presence and interventions will make this very timely virtual event an important point of reference in the public consultation process kicked off by the European Commission in the broader context of the Green Deal, with a view to formulate a legislative initiative for the inclusion of maritime transport to the EU emission trading scheme. Thank you very much for your attention.
I would like to thank Minister Kadiz and Andreas for their opening remarks. A very warm welcome to our panelists and to all of you that are joining virtually for today's seminar. We will be discussing the EU's intention to include shipping into the EU emissions trading system and exploring if it represents an elixir or a threat to sustainability. The ambitions of the European Green Deal require a net reduction of at least 55% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2050. The inclusion of maritime transport to EU's ETS is one of the proposed initiatives to achieve this. On 13th of November, a public consultation was launched by the European Commission, providing interested parties the opportunity to express their views and contribute to all steps of the policy and law-making process. For Cyprus, it is vital that stakeholders from across the maritime industry engage collaboratively with regulators and NGOs alike. This is why we want to facilitate today's dialogue further, rather than simply submitting our own views. We must seize this opportunity to ensure that all interested and affected voices are heard, working collectively towards the best possible outcome, an outcome that enables maritime transport to make a meaningful contribution to climate change, while at the same time safeguarding its competitiveness. We hope that the exchange today will help to provide the Commission with clarity on the best way forward. In Cyprus, we believe that global rules are the fairest and most pragmatic for an international industry such as shipping. However, we acknowledge that the European Commission has a different level of ambition and would like to proceed with regional measures. We have always proactively and constructively participated in policy development on both an international and regional level. And as an EU member state with a large fleet and high level of technical expertise, we want to contribute to this exercise in a meaningful way. Striking the right balance between the green transformation and competitiveness is a challenge for the industry, but at the same time, it holds opportunities. We believe that each and every one of us has an obligation to support efforts in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Flag states are well positioned to support the shipping industry to make sustainable shipping choices, which it can benefit from both operationally and technically. This is why Cyprus is about to launch a range of green initiatives, which will reward those vessels implementing measures to reduce environmental impact. Annual tonnage tax will be lowered by up to 30% for each vessel that is able to demonstrate genuine emissions reduction. More information on Cyprus Green Initiatives program will be available very soon. But without further delay, let us proceed with our discussion. I would like now to introduce our panelists. I'm joined by 3 ladies and 4 gentlemen. From the regulator side, we have Mrs. Magdalena Adamovic, a member of the European Parliament. And from the European Commission, Mrs. Clara Della Torre, Deputy Director General of Directorate General for Climate Action. From the shipowner side, we have Mr. Andreas Hagianni, founder of Cyprus Sea Lines Company Limited, Captain Alfred Hartmann, Chairman of the Supervisory Board of Hartmann AG, Mr. Philippos Philis, founder and Managing Director of Lemisoler Navigation Company Limited, and from the NGOs, we have Dr. Faik Abbasov, Shipping Director at Transport and Environment, and Dr. Xenia Loizidou, founding member and chairperson of ACHTI Project and Research Center. I would like to start this virtual exchange of views with Mrs. Adamovic, representing the European Parliament. Mrs. Adamovic, the floor is yours.
Hello, actually good afternoon. I would like to welcome the organizers of this conference, and I would like to thank especially the Shipping Deputy Minister in Cyprus, Vassilios Dimitriades, for for inviting me and for giving me the floor. So recently I have a chance to work on a various European Parliament's dossier concerning the maritime sector. Of course, the question if, when and how to include maritime transport in the ETS comes back in the discussions. Therefore, I believe that our debate today is very important and timely event. First, I would like to stress that European Parliament, there is a lot of at the European Parliament, there is a lot of support for the reduction of emission from the maritime transport. Our common goal, as spelled in the European Green Deal, is to ensure that Europe will become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. If we want to achieve this goal, we need contribution from all sectors of the European economy. However, it is also necessary to underline that various European Parliament's committees and political groups have a quite diverse position on what is necessary and what is realistic when it comes to greening of the European shipping. Therefore, I strongly believe that the possible inclusion of the maritime transport in the ETS should be based on comprehensive impact assessment prepared by the European Commission. This impact assessment should take into account first global context and IMO initiatives to reduce emission, then competitiveness and employment in the European shipping, and third, alternative market-based measures for the European maritime transport. Please note that the European Commission is currently conducting extensive public consultations on the reform of the ETS. It is a very important opportunity for all stakeholders to share their views, concerns and expectations. And I'm very glad to see that so many companies, trade associations, NGOs, think tanks and citizens have already submitted their contribution. We need a broad and inclusive debate in order to work our well-balanced and stable regulatory framework. I would like to also stress that the potential inclusion of the maritime transport in the ETS should not be perceived as a silver bullet. If we really want to green European shipping, we need a more holistic approach. For example, we should encourage the development of the wide range of low carbon and zero carbon alternative fuels that will gradually replace heavy ship fuel oil. This, however, requires a lot of investment in research, technology, and infrastructure. So, to sum up my introductory remarks, I would like to say yes for ambitious but realistic decarbonisation of the European maritime transport. Thank you for the attention, and I'm waiting for the further discussion.
Thank you, Mrs. Adamovich, for these initial statements. I will now pass the floor to Mrs. De La Torre from DG Clima to make her introductory remarks. Mrs. De La Torre, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, authorities, minister, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting us to this very timely debate, because as previous speaker had mentioned, we are preparing in the European Commission. We are working on the future proposal for the ETS for the maritime sector, and the public consultation is open. So today's discussion is extremely useful for us to collect views from those that are the main stakeholders and main actors of this field, and certainly the decision makers. We know that our first priority in the European Union and member states is to fight against this pandemic. However, once the pandemic will be over, which hopefully will be soon, the climate challenge will still be there. And therefore, we need to continue keeping ambition to observe our commitments under the Paris Agreement. As the Minister said in his introduction, the Green Deal is meant to be the growth strategy of the European Union, and it's even more important now under this terrible crisis. Therefore, it's the implementation of the Green Deal and its contribution to the recovery. It's a top priority of the European Commission in leading our way towards 2050 neutrality, climate neutrality. We have, as it has been mentioned, proposed to raise ambition to decrease further our emissions of greenhouse gases by 55% in 2030, so that this enables us to reach our 2050 targets. And there, of course, this increase of ambition needs that every sector contributes with its fair share, because we have to remember that in the next 10 years, we will have to reduce emissions as much as we've been reducing in the last 25 years. In the shipping sector, I will very much agree with what the Member of Parliament has just said. There is no silver bullet. And in no sector, by the way, there is no silver bullet. And our intention in the European Commission would be to propose precisely, as she was saying, a basket of measures that are lines that should work along with the measures that are being agreed in the International Maritime Organization. The extension of the European emissions trading system will be assessed with taking into consideration different aspects, to which we can come later on, but it will be at first and foremost be complemented by a proposal on fuels for maritime, precisely to boost the demand for sustainable alternative fuels. We are also working on the revision of existing directives dealing with taxation, energy taxation, dealing with fuel infrastructure, and not least with renewable energy. So, as Mr. Adamovich was saying, we have to look at this as a whole package of measures that are going to enable the sector to contribute to decarbonization. So ETS is evidently part of this measure, so that the price of the seaborne transport can reflect the impact it has on climate change. We've seen until now that ETS is one of the most powerful tools that we have had in bringing the emissions down in a technologically neutral manner and at the lowest cost. So it allows, having ETS allows, at least until now, this is what we've seen, to implement the cheapest and readily abatement projects that will be the cheapest way, and we will be picking up the most readable projects. The ETS covers a number of sectors for time being that represent around 40% of all EU emissions, and data show that in these sectors the drop in emissions has been of 30% compared to 2005. This system also has an important dimension, which is raising revenues that can be used to finance climate action and innovation, research innovation indeed. And the sector also, we have to say, that has proved itself to be quite resilient, and we've seen that in its behavior during this crisis. In practice, we will be assessing the extension of the ETS to shipping as part of the general review of the ETS system, which will be adopted is in the work program of the Commission for next June. We have already started, therefore, our impact assessment preparations, and the most important thing is the open public consultation, which I'm glad to hear will be replied. And I can encourage everyone to do the same, please. The more we know, the better we'll be able to fine-tune our proposals. So we do the impact assessment, we present our proposal in June, and then it goes to the co-legislators to discuss and eventually decide on it. I'll stop here for the time being, and will be coming, if you wish so, to other more specific aspects of the possible proposal. Thank you.
Mrs. De La Torre, many thanks for your initial statement. I think that together with Mrs. Adamovich representing the regulatory perspective, you have already set the scene. Let me now turn to the stakeholders, and I will go first to Mr. Andreas Hadjiannis to make his introductory statement. Mr. Hadjiannis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And good afternoon again to everyone. It's an honor to be with you on such a high caliber panelist and the decision-making people. Now, I must start by saying I fully agree with the ministers and with Mrs. De La Torres and Mrs. Adamovich. We must first, however, understand the problem and then be pragmatic in solving it. Now, greenhouse emissions, what are they? NOx by large, NOx, SOx, methane, and CO2. The shipping the past couple of years, through billions of investments, have solved the SOx issue, the sulfur issue. We have brought it down from in excess of 3.5% content in the oil to below 0.5%. We spend a lot of money in the clean oil and to scrap it. And we've also been installing Tier 3 engines for some time to solve the NOx issue. Methane is not our problem. It doesn't come from shipping. It comes only from LNG engines. So it leaves us with CO2. So how do we get CO2 in the air, in the atmosphere? We get it through combustion by burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels is a heavy oil, a fossil fuel, sorry. The heavy oil, which is now suffered low, the LNG and the LPG. Now, taking into account the energy contents, they emit about the same CO2. So we don't actually have an alternative. Where does shipping differ from the shore industry and from the shore transportation? It's very different in as much as we cannot have ships run on electricity through batteries. The shore industry can run on electricity. There is a system there. All we have to do is produce electricity through renewable energy, and we have plenty of that, plenty of renewable energy. Already we have 25% produced from wind farms, from solar energy, and from waterfalls. And there is a big talk about, you all heard about it, the nuclear reaction, the new system for nuclear reactions through molten salt. Unfortunately, we cannot take this onto the ships. So when it comes to the shore-based industries, I fully agree, and the ETS does work as an alternative, and to incentivize the people to go to renewable energy, to electricity and to renewable energy. When it comes to shipping, it's a lot more difficult. In other words, it's 1,000 times easier to produce electricity through renewable energy rather than on a ship. So we have to take this well into account. What can we do to help? I will go a step back to say that at the outset of the Industrial Revolution, there is nobody. The emissions was a concern of no one. Today, 200 years later, when the emissions double of what the globe can absorb through its natural sinks, and the climate change is already a reality, we face it, and so all of us problem. There are still no emission pollution culture. We have to create that culture. If you look around you in the cities and you see how much lighting we have in the cities, not needed lighting, in our gardens, in our houses, in our, or in detestable billboards. If you see the cars, the family cars, 9 out of 10 5-seat cars carry only their driver. So the waste of energy we have is amazing. If you go to shipping, the situation is not different. I ran some figures on the IMO data. I can tell you the ton-mile emission for today's round voyage, which is the norm of fish shipping. I don't know if you're all familiar with that term. Is about 4 grams per ton mile. If you run these figures on optimum ship, for the optimum cargo, for the optimum ship, at the optimum speed, then this figure comes down to, by 75%, it comes down to 1.25 from 4%. So what I'm saying is that, yes, shipping should contribute, but there is a lot of scope in that to the reduction of emissions. But it has to be not through all this talk about inventing the new ammonium production and change all the engines on all the ships. That's next generation, so further out from today. All these new technologies can be installed ashore and be used to produce electricity, which applies to 88% of the CO2 emissions, and which are easily installed. They are monitored by specialists, they are monitored by the scientists. On the ships, and especially this talk about the Terra power, the invention of the new nuclear reaction with molten salt, which is supposed to be safe. It's a lot easier to have few of them installed on shore and monitored by scientists, rather than have them on thousands of ships change the engines of thousands of ships and be in the hands of ordinary crew members at the high seas or in our ports. So I think we have to be pragmatic on what we're looking for shipping. And I will finish with this. The same application goes on the aeroplanes, on the aviation, but the airlines are the controllers of the transportation by air. Shipping is not the ship owners who are in control of the transportation. The controller of the transportation, the guy who is going to choose the best method of transporting, the best ship for the transportation, the optimum size for the ship is the transporter. This is the exporter or the importer. That's the man that controls that. So that's where the ETS should be addressed. And that should help him go on this economies of scale in respect of CO2 emissions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Hadjiyannis, for addressing the specificities of the sector, but also for underlying the fact that we are in search of a new culture. So I will now turn to Dr. Apasov, representing Transport and Environment, from his initial statements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dimitriadis. Good afternoon, all. Thank you very much for this invitation and opportunity to address stakeholders on the EU emissions trading scheme and shipping. European shipping is an important part of the European economy, and as an environmental organization, we recognize it. European shipping carries about 75% of the EU external trade and about 36% of the EU internal trade, according to the European Commission. These demonstrate how important shipping is to the EU economy. But with this economic opportunity, there are also responsibilities that come with it. European shipping is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. If EU shipping were a country, it would be country number 8 in terms of its greenhouse gas emissions, if we put it in the ranking with other EU member states. Today, ships are so huge that it is cheaper to transport one container from China to Europe than driving the same container on a truck from Paris to Warsaw, for example. Part of it is due to economies of scale and that are quite exciting, that help to reduce the transport costs. But other side of the problem is because shipping does not pay for its greenhouse gas emissions. The external environmental costs are not part of the transport costs and makes shipping so cheap. European Green Deal aims, among others, to address this issue by including shipping in the EU emissions trading scheme, and we fully support that goal. To be honest, for us, for environmental organizations, it has always been a question of how, as opposed to if. Now we have a situation where climate change is the #1 priority after COVID, obviously, today to address at the European level. We have European Green Deal, and we have the positions of the European Commission as well as the European Parliament, as expressed by Mr. Kettis. That the European Parliament has already expressed its position that it wants to act on shipping, and it has already made certain amendments proposed in the EU MRV regulation already include shipping in the ETS. Now, today's discussion will be about the ETS, and ETS comes in different forms and shapes. At least it can come. Without prejudging further conversations down the line, I would like to express several thoughts about my organization's preference and recommendations how to design shipping ETS. There are several ideas on the table. One is including shipping in the ETS as per default, meaning that ships will be required to purchase and surrender allowances, which are equal to their emissions. This would be one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be similar to what the European Parliament proposes, which is creating a pay-as-you-go fund that would work under the ETS directive, but function more like a CO2 levy. There are several benefits, pros to this system, and I would welcome the opportunity to discuss it further with the stakeholders later today. But I would like to mention one important element. It was mentioned that ETS is only one tool among many others, but it's a very important one. And to make sure that we take the most, to take advantage and to get the best out of this system, we have to make sure that the scope of emissions covered by the ETS is as broad as possible. Ideally, maritime ETS would cover all MRV scope, or at least half of the extra EU journeys, in addition to intra-EU journeys. It could be all outbound emissions, all inbound emissions, or 50-50. I would certainly be keen to hear the preference of the shipping industry on those three options. There are certain elements that we need to take into account when choosing the scope of ETS, notably the impact on short sea shipping, the impact on the design, and so on and so forth. But all in all, EU-ETS, or a funding mechanism, creates an opportunity to not only reduce emissions, but help deploy zero carbon fuels, zero carbon technologies. One way of doing it would be using the proceeds of the ETS to create a fund to bridge the price gap between the dirty fuel, which is the current fuel, and the future alternatives. My organization is currently assessing a system called Contracts for Difference, and hopefully we'll be able to publish on this in the new year. I would like to also mention two key elements. Hopefully those will be addressed as well later today. Again, shipping ETS is a tool that is only one of the tools in the tool basket. It is not a silver bullet, but there is no measure that is a silver bullet. When we're looking at decarbonisation of other sectors, we always see several measures being applied next to each other, addressing different aspects of decarbonisation and technological transition. And ETS for shipping is only one of such measures. The other measure is Fuel EU Maritime, and it will need to be designed in a way also to help guide the industry in this decarbonisation pathway. I would like to stop here, and I'm certainly looking forward to further conversation with the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasov. Well, and thanks for presenting all these different options, which of course our intention is to try and address them in this virtual debate. I will now turn to Captain Hartmann to make his initial statement. Captain Hartmann, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Honorable Minister Vasilios Dimitriades, thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to take part of this panel discussion. It's good to be back in Cyprus, even if it's only virtual today, but we have a long-standing and strong connection with the Cypriot shipping hub, and I can assure that this connection stays strong even in these challenging times of the pandemic. I would like to make it very clear at the beginning, we as a shipping industry like to be decarbonized as soon as possible, better tomorrow than day after. But it's a question, what is the way to do it? And this takes some time, and we have to discuss, and we have to discuss it openly, because there are many ways. It is no secret that shipping business is almost entirely an international one. If I only look at the fleet, my company is owning and operating almost 120 ships. Those ships spend most of their commercial life outside the EU. If you average the sailing pattern of these ships, you will see that they spend only about 6 to 10% of their commercial life in the EU, if at all. This is the reason why shipping is asking for and supporting international regulation for the sector. Regional approaches always fall short in shipping. The EU ETS is an example for that. When we look at the airlines, for example, with a similar international trading pattern, like ships, we see that their emissions have not been brought down by their integrations in the EU ETS, but instead have actually grown. And if you look at the airports today, if you travel, so there are not so many passengers, but the airports are full of cargo, and to ship cargo with a plane cost about 85 times more CO2 than with a ship. Shipping is different because shipping is already today the key mode of transport for international trade with the lowest CO2 emissions at all. To give you an example, to carry a container across a distance of 1 kilometer, a train discharges about 5 times as much CO2 as a modern container ship. A plane discharges even almost 85 times more CO2 than a ship, and a truck even 15 times more. And what other industries can accomplish, even though an increasing volume of goods is transported by seas, the level of CO2 emissions of ships is actually declining. Per ton of cargo transported 1 kilometer, the CO2 emissions of ships fell by approximately 30% between 2008 and 2018. The reason behind this performance progress in shipping is not only the high investments ship owners and operators took for saving fuel and making their fleet more efficient, but also unified regulations of the sector through the International Maritime Organization. The IMO is very active on the CO2 front and has not only adopted concrete CO2 reduction objectives over the past, but concrete measures to bring down the emissions of new and existing ships and to increase their carbon efficiency. However, the improvements in the efficiency of conventional fossil fuel ships as a result of operational or technical measures alone will not sufficient to phase out carbon emissions of ships entirely. Yes, it is clear that these IMO measures, regardless of whether you judge them as effective or not, will not decarbonize shipping. This final and necessary step can only be taken by shipping if we find new carbon neutral fuels and propulsion systems for our ships. Let me make this point very clear. Shipping is ready to take this step, to fund research and development on a large scale and to push the sector to fully decarbonize. That's why shipping proposed in IMO, an international research fund, $5 billion over 10 years to catalyze what we call the fourth propulsion revolution in shipping to decarbonize ships completely. If regulators now believe that the existing IMO regulations, which have been negotiated under the participation of all EU member states and the EU Commission, don't go far enough, and that the industry initiative for decarbonizing shipping needs further incentives in the form of pricing carbon, regulators should concentrate to introduce such measures via IMO on an international scale. What becomes apparent is that an ETS that integrates international shipping, but with only regional application and no mechanism to return its revenues to the regulated shipping sector, seems highly ineffective. It neither incentivizes decarbonization of the sector in the scale necessary to actually change things, nor does it stimulate any research and development to fully decarbonize shipping in the final matter. Therefore, nothing is to be gained if international shipping is integrated in the EU ETS, except that EU member states will generate revenues for their own national budgets. That is the reason why we ask Europe to turn the threat of an EU ETS for shipping into an opportunity that shipping can work with. This could be possible if a measure for shipping in Europe is limited in its scope and does not include the whole of international shipping, respects the polluters pay principle, ideally in the form of a levy on the fuel used, and ensures that any revenues are returned to the sector to support research and development of zero carbon fuels and propulsion systems. If these principles are not respected, the EU ETS would merely be yet another regional regulation punishing the sector for not using zero carbon fuels, which are not readily available for widespread use in the market yet. Thank you.
Captain Hartmann, many thanks for your introduction. I take that the sector's determination to decarbonize, and of course your clear view on the scope of the possible introduction of shipping to the EU emissions trading scheme. I would now like to turn to Dr. Loizidou to present her introductory remarks. Dr. Loizidou, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Dimitriadis. Kalispera σας. Good evening. I would like to start responding to the question of the title of this panel discussion. The title is ETS in Shipping, Elixir or Threat to Sustainability. I believe that it is neither an elixir nor a threat. It is just one of the available solutions, a tool to help reach the target, which is to minimize greenhouse gases emissions. The European Union aims to be climate neutral by 2050 with an economy with net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And this objective is at the heart, as the Minister Kadis said, of the European Green Deal. So with the new circular economy strategy, Europe will transform into a more competitive, resource-efficient economy. And to do this, European Union is addressing a range of economic sectors, shipping being a major one, obviously. So I want to make 3 points in this first comment. Some of them are in line with Mr. Abbasov. Obviously, NGOs have the same way of thinking. So my first point is, we need a blend of measures, a coherent package. So as I already said, ETS in shipping is one of the options. It is obviously that by expanding ETS in shipping, Europe wants to give a push to stimulate the uptake in shipping for the research and innovation, perhaps on alternative fuel or others, as we heard. But is EU ETS ready to expand to shipping, and is shipping ready to respond? I'm quoting here Article 23 of the directive back in 2003, the 87 EC, for establishing ETS. So Article 23 says something important. Emission allowance trading should form part of a comprehensive, a coherent package of policies and measures implemented at member state and community level. So is this coherent package in place? Experience of implementing ETS until now is not always positive, and it's good that there will be a review of ETS until now. Cyprus is definitely an example of issues with ETS. We will perhaps have time later to discuss on this. Could other market-based measures be more effective or work synergistic with a global ETS, or a fuel levy would be more effective? Just to keep in mind this anachronism of still having subsidies to maritime sector in the form of fossil fuel tax exemptions. So it is important to have the life cycle assessment and the effectiveness analysis of all the available options and assess their added value. Find the best blend of measures, always as a part of a comprehensive, a coherent package of policies and measures. What is at stake here is to manage to catch up in the race against the destruction of planet due to climate change, i.e. minimizing greenhouse gases emissions. So this was my first point. My second point is partnerships. It is important to have a horizontal integrated approach among sectors. If ETS or other measures are implemented in shipping, as in other sectors, there should be, Mr. Abbasov already said about this, an ocean fund, a pay-as-you-go fund, whatever you can name it, a fund, combined effort to promote circular economy actions across all sectors, inland and sea. Circular economy is the flagship of Europe. So I'm not talking just about offsetting. I'm talking about synergies. Sustainable Development Goal 17 should be served more effectively, not just as multi-stakeholder consultations, but building strong, effective, and long-lasting partnerships among the sectors of economy and society, so as to be together in this race to reverse climate change impacts. And my third point is diversification. One size fits all? Definitely, this is not correct. It is necessary to draw from the experience of previous years, of previous implementation of ETS. The particularities of island countries, such as Cyprus and Malta, should be taken into account. Even Croatia and Greece, with all their islands. If there will be an additional cost on maritime transports, then these countries, our countries, will have to accommodate a disproportional cost compared to other countries. And we don't have any option. It's geography. We don't have any other option to trade or to travel. 99% of the goods that are imported or reach Cyprus come by sea. We heard that just 35 it is in the rest of Europe. So these particularities should be taken into consideration when designing any kind of measure. One size does not fit all, and definitely does not fit any sustainable concept. Diversification is the basis of sustainability. Thank you, Mr. Dimitriadis. That was all as the first comment.
Dr. Loizidou, many thanks for your the three clear points, plus the fact that you made the first attempt to respond to our question, whether ETS is an elixir or basically a burden to sustainability. So let me now turn to Mr. Feliz for his initial statements. Mr. Feliz, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Minister Dimitriadis, for inviting me at this important discussion. And of course, congratulations for this great initiative. Speaking last could be always a daunting task, yet I will try to be precise on my opinion. And excuse me if I may repeat some of the statements made by the other panelists. I will start by saying that decarbonisation at this moment is under gridlock. The inclusion of shipping in the EU-ETS will cause maybe three events, among others. The first is the disruption of the European trade. Second is the penalization of the European ship owners, even if the intended ETS will be flag neutral. And third, it will trigger most likely a massive carbon leakage. And exactly such intersection will block the way towards net reduction of the greenhouse gases. Without a transparent market-based measure on a global level, which could demonstrate clearly the net reduction of greenhouse gases, any regional measure such EU-ETS will become, to my understanding, a money collection mechanism from shipping to be used for the general budgetary needs of the EU and not to be invested in the research and development of either alternative fuels or any other form of carbon neutral propulsion. What we need is a carbon pricing system enabling the industry to decarbonize and to fulfill the following three pillars. The first pillar is the political acceptance and durability on a global level. The second is equitability, and the third, to enable predictability and viability for the businesses. To my understanding, with the EU-ETS regulation as announced, none of the three pillars mentioned above are fulfilled, and I will try to explain my position. Regarding politically acceptable and durable on a global level, I think the decarbonization of the shipping industry is a global challenge, as the industry itself and should be regulated at a global level. Otherwise, we'll undermine the ongoing work and negotiations at the IMO level to implement its initial strategy. Additionally, such a measure will contribute towards disruption of the worldwide trade and possibly create the fundamentals for a potential political tension with non-EU countries. And of course, I think EU will face retaliation from some countries. Additionally, the revenues, the way the system is designed, seem not to be returned to the industry to facilitate the transition towards decarbonizations, whereas a global system under development on IMO level will provide such regulation. The second pillar is the equitability. Shipping has a very complex characteristics arising out of the numerous ship types as far as their usability, their trade, their technology, the contractual relationships, and the wide range of stakeholders, making the EU-ETS with the certainty of a mathematical law a non-equitable system for all stakeholders, and in particular for the shipowners. Furthermore, such a system will have negative effect on SMEs, which account for over 80% in the maritime sector, and even more an impact on the tram and short sea sectors. An additional point which most stakeholders cannot understand is why the EU wishes to reduce greenhouse gases and greenhouse gas emissions from the maritime sector, and at the same time exclude the majority of ships operating within EU waters, and specifically the ships below 5,000 gross tonnage. The fourth IMO greenhouse study shows an increase in the emissions from ships in domestic voyages. They fear that the inclusion of these smaller vessels will contribute towards a modal shift, reinforce the assumption of not a proportionate implementation of the existing ETS on land-based transportation. Of course, we do appreciate that the shipowners or the shipowning SPVs may be part of an MBM because it is the easy target, but the responsible entity is a cargo-owning company, and this must be captured and clearly defined in the collection mechanism. The third pillar refers to the predictability and viability for businesses. A number of big companies and traders will be in a position to hedge and parallel maybe trade in the ETS, whereas others, most likely SMEs, which are the backbone of the European shipping, will not be in the position or have the capacity, both in terms of liquidity and resources, to do so. Large organizations with established trading desks will take account of the carbon price, and through their network will use the flexibility given by the ETS to benefit from the price arbitrage between the various carbon exchanges. This will create a two-tier market where mainly large companies and entities outside the maritime sector will control the carbon market and the pricing. Consequently, the market will be driven through sentiment and the speculators' appetite, and not through the market fundamentals. As a last point, the introduction of the EU ETS will become an additional burden of the budgetary process of each shipowning company, and will further add to the viability uncertainties faced by the shipping industry over the last year. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Phillips, many thanks. And I think with this introductory statement by Mr. Feliz, we have concluded the first round of this debate. Now, what I would like to do is to turn to our panelists with a first set of questions. And I will just read the questions. ETS comes in many shapes and sizes. Given the specificity and the international character of the shipping sector, what should be the do's and don'ts in the Commission proposal? And how much should ETS affect EU shipping and internal market policies for the proposal to be proportional? Before giving the floor to the panelists, I would like to underline, because one of the basic objectives of this virtual debate, which is, of course, to contribute to the public consultation of the European Commission. So I would like the panelists to stick to their interventions, and in the do's and don'ts to respond to the following things. On the regulated entities, basically, who bears the responsibility, who is paying the carbon price? Second, the geographical scope that you have already pretty much addressed it already, whether it should cover the intra-EU, the short sea shipping, or it should expand and cover also the international voyages, which is already the case under the MRV. And third, whether the ETS system should be exclusively, we should have a system exclusively for the sector, or whether shipping should be a part of the existing emissions trading system. Okay, so I will invite the panelists in 2 minutes of their introduction to respond to these 3 important points. So I will give the floor first to the stakeholders. So because the Commission and, of course, Mrs. Adamovich from the European Parliament, to listen to the views of the stakeholders and have the opportunity to respond at the end. So I will give the floor first to Dr. Abbasov to respond to this first set of questions, and mainly to the 3 points on the regulated entities, the scope, and the form of the ETS, whether it should be exclusive one for shipping or it should be part of the existing one. Dr. Abbasov, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Just to quickly go through all those 3 questions. Regulated entity. Regulated entity is very much tied to the broad philosophical question, who bears the responsibility of carbon emissions? As environmental organization will always say, it is the polluter pays principle. In the case of shipping, who is the polluter? CO2 comes out of the chimney of a ship. A ship carries the cargo on behalf of the cargo owner, charterer, or eventually a final consumer. So the system needs to be designed in a way to empower passing on those costs to the final consumers. As simple as this. Whether this is done via a new definition under the MRV or a new definition on the ETS, all those need to be assessed. But we have to make sure that on the one hand, we have a functioning system that we still can monitor emissions under the MRV. But also, on the other hand, we can empower ship owners to be able to pass on those costs to the charterers, to the final consumers, eventually, who would make a choice on using more efficient ships over inefficient ones, and also help them use or incentivize them use cleaner fuels over heavy fuel oil. In terms of scope, and I should mention that the question of scope is very much related to the question of regulated entity. Why? Well, first of all, if we believe that the emissions scope needs to be as broad as possible and should include extra EU journeys. As I mentioned in my introductory statement, whether it's inbound emissions, outbound emissions, 50-50, we wouldn't mind much as an environmental organization. It needs to be at least one of the 3. Scope of emissions and the regulatory entity are related in a way that if we do not have extra EU emissions covered, then designing a system with a totally new regulated entity probably would be too much to ask for the European Commission, because the current regulated entity is already defined, and we would need to change it if we have a larger scope. If it is a smaller scope, that reduces the argument to explore that option. The same for the new system or existing ETS. Whether we create a fund or whether we use default ETS, it would still need to somehow function under the ETS directive. So that is forgiven. But whether we ask ship owners to purchase and surrender allowances, or they pay a certain amount of fee, which is predefined every year, and as the European Parliament suggested, to link it to the ETS price in the previous year, that could be one option to make the system work in a way that makes it comfortable for the ship owners to comply with. Having an ETS fund would actually make the ETS function as a CO2 levy, which I understood is a preferable option. But creation of a fund in itself is a regulatory effort, and this is an investment, political investment. If we do not include extra EU shipping into the system, would be exempting about 60% of emissions, and that makes that does not make worthwhile of the Commission's time, of the regulators' time, to create a new funding mechanism, let alone changing the regulatory regulated entity. So those need to be taken into account as one single package in designing and implementing the ETS.
Well, thanks for that clear answer. Well, I would like to turn to Captain Hartmann. He already voiced his preference for the scope, but Captain Hartmann, I would like you also to elaborate more on this, plus if you can bring into the discussion your view about the regulator that entities, and of course your approach in relation to the internal market policies of the EU. Whether with such a system, do you see any effect or impact from the introduction of an ETS for shipping? So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. From my perspective, an ETS is the least optimal measure to incentivize shipping to decarbonize. That is for clear. Even a carbon tax or a levy on the fuel used for ships would be more effective than an ETS, because most of the shipping companies are small entities with 1 or up to 5 or 10 ships, and each ship is a single ship company. So who is going to pay? And as a poor ship owner with 1 or 2 ships, he knows what he did in the previous year, but he does not know what his ships will do in the next year or next 2 years, because either the vessel will go on time charter in the Caribbean, let me say, for example, or will stay in Europe, or will be on contract of affreightment or in the spot market. So who is going to pay something in advance, most probably? And of course, at the end of the day, he can pass this cost if he is happy enough to the end user. But somebody has to pay it in advance, which is almost not possible for such a small entity. I'm also afraid, because Vice President Timmermans of the EU Commission, as well as the European Parliament, pointed out recently that road transportation should not be integrated in the EU ETS system, because the responsible entities are just too diverse and too small scale, but they're the same. It's the same as I said previously in shipping. So there are so many shipping companies, really small ones. But to be quite honest, the most important don't is an integration of international shipping in the EU ETS. The last thing the sector, but also Europe currently needs, is yet another barrier to international trade. Europe depends on a free flow of shipping services to and from its seaports in order to keep supply times functioned. The pandemic has shown us how vital shipping is to keep Europe economy working, especially in times of crisis. And I ask you, if I come with a cargo from Hong Kong to Hamburg, for instance, why the Chinese should not ask for an ETS system in China, and then you have to pass the Strait of Singapore. Of course, you pay another ETS system, and then Sudan probably, or Gulf of Suez, or the Egyptians, there's another good opportunity to collect some money for that. So then shipping would be almost impossible. And the question is also then if ship owners move with their head offices out of Europe, because then probably they have to pay only as long as they work in Europe, but not outside of Europe. That's a big problem. A number of foreign governments have already voiced concern over the possible integration of international shipping in ETS, namely South Korea and Japan, and also now China. They raise their eyebrows, and that is definitely not a good sign. China is one of the most important trading partners of the EU, and if not one of the most important shipping markets for European ship owners. And we all remember what happened with the ETS on aviation. I believe Europe learned the lesson when it tried to integrate international flights on EU ETS. It caused huge diplomatic turmoil, where China even threatened to cancel all orders with Airbus, and was one of the work to forbid its carriers to participate on the EU ETS. So I hope this will not happen with shipping, and we have to be really careful for that. Of course, what we need or what we have to do, and therefore a carbon tax or carbon levy, if we have to do something, that's something it's easy to control, it's easy to collect, and also easy to spend it for R&D, because it can be measured on the fuel consumed, and ships are not going to the fuel station taking 10 liters of diesel or benzene. So that is a very controlled area, and it's very easy to collect. And then we could use it for a technology to introduce carbon-free fuel oils. That is what is necessary, and that is what we have to do. The ETS, in my opinion, it's not the right way, and it's extremely complicated, taking all the differences in shipping in mind. Thank you.
Many thanks. Let me now turn to Dr. Loizidou again. I understand that from her first statement, she put into the question these three approaches: the basket of measures, partnerships, and the diversification. So having this in mind as an approach, how do you see this EU ETS taking shape for shipping in Europe to be effective and to have a meaningful contribution to climate change?
Well, as I said, and all the members of the panelists already said, the issue is to accommodate the needs of this very important sector, shipping, and the target, which is carbon neutral economy by 2050 in Europe. So what we believe is that, again, who bears? The polluter pays, but who is the polluter here? And shipping, the supply chain in shipping is very big. So that's why we are urging for a life cycle assessment and see who is where in this chain. As Captain Hartman said, ship owners, small ship owners, bigger ones, ETS is a complicated system. We know that there could be discrepancies. We know that now, because of COVID, we have surpluses. in allowances, and there is this big debate on how to deal with the surplus of allowances without going to lower carbon prices. And we're talking about 2 billion allowances. And perhaps if we go to lower carbon prices, this is a weaker incentive to reduce emissions. So all these issues should be taken into consideration. And I'm repeating the proposal, let's say, or what I said, we need a blend of measures, a box of measures, a coherent package, not focus on just ETS, which could be really a problem, or try to regulate this in a better way. I also want to raise the issue of desertification. We saw from previous implementation of ETS that some countries suffered from not being able to accommodate, to comply with the needs. They needed to have more, buy more emission allowances. So the people, the consumers, had to pay for this. We are islands. Cyprus is an island country. Malta is an island country. And the islandic character of European countries should be taken into consideration when we speak about the bigger carrier of goods in Europe. So I am just concluding that these issues should be taken into consideration and are of great importance to have a system that will work. This is what we want, to work.
Dr. Loizidou, many thanks. I would like now to turn to Mr. Philis. It is clear that there is a mandate, a strong mandate and a political commitment from the European Commission to introduce shipping into the ETS. So with your experience, what is your message to Brussels? What do you consider as red lines? What are your do's and don'ts in this legislative process with your understanding on how this system works and the impact to the shipping sector? What is your advice to Brussels?
Thank you, Minister. I will start with the do's. Any system should be scalable and aligned with the IMO market-based measure. Second, it's very important to avoid the carbon leakage, and I have plenty of examples to address if this will be the case. A third very important is that we need a fixed carbon price for a reasonable period, at least 5 years, to enable predictability and viability of the companies. Additional, we need a definition of the responsible entities. Other panelists mentioned that. I fully agree with Mr. Abbasov that the cargo owner actually is the ultimate responsible partner, and there you should address any levy or any scheme of measure. Additionally, I believe we should include all vessels above 400 gross tonnage. It's very important because it's a very big part of the entire transportation, sea transportation, and I believe we should include if we are looking towards decarbonization. A very important matter also refers to where the money will go. And to my understanding, all monies to be returned to the industry with some specific targets, primarily to develop an R&D fund enabling the decarbonization of the industry. Second, to finance the fuel differential for the early movers when the transition to the alternative fuel will be, the early movers they have to pay a huge differential on from the fossil fuels to the alternative fuels. Therefore, there must be an incentive in order to motivate the early movers to take the new technology on. Additionally, my opinion is that those ships that progressively are reducing their carbon intensity indicators should be also incentivized. And as last point on that part, I think we should develop also a system to incentivize the removal of very high polluting altered tonnage. What the regulators should avoid is with any system, the political tension should be avoided with the third countries, and consequently any retaliation that they come after. Also, not to allow the white collar intermediates to regulate any price. Therefore, we insist on a fixed price for a certain period. And very important to protect the short sea and the intra-European trade is to avoid the shifting of shipping to intermodal transport, which at least is 10 times more polluted than the transport by sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feliz. Indeed, the modal backshift has always been an issue of concern. Let me now turn to Mr. Hadjiannis, and I would like to ask him about the regulator entities. Who bears the responsibility, in your view, Mr. Hadjiannis, on this? And I would also like to ask you about the impact of such a measure to not only to maritime transport, but to EU in general. If you can say a few words on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I think we all agree that the core question is who pollutes. Now, to answer this question, you have to go a step back. We are a large company. We are very interested in the issue. We have experts working on it. The answer is that nobody knows of any alternative. And I don't think we're going to have an alternative for combustion on ships that we have today for the next generations. I can't see for all the living generations today have an alternative fuel for ships that are clean from emitting CO2. We'll explain this in the first round. So the only alternative we have is to optimize transportation. That's where the saving will come from. So the question who pays is who is doing the organization of the trading, who can optimize the trading, who can bring down the ton-mile emission. This is not the owner. The owner executes orders. This is not the charter. By and large, the charter executes orders, is the cargo organizer. And when we're talking about a European ambition to have Europe initiative, then it's got to be the European importer and the European exporter. Nobody else can be forced to pay anything. Now, the regulators must also have in mind that you have to incentivize the saver of the incentivize the saver of the pollution against the polluter for no reason. In other words, the polluter that he doesn't care about polluting. And he, for instance, instead of taking his parcel, his cargo on the optimum ship, it takes a 5,000 cargo, say, on a 5,000 tonner. He puts it as a parcel to come to Europe. Instead of asking the ship to go on high speed, we do exactly as the airlines do. They go on optimum speed. instead of taking a long ballast, he chose a nearby ship through a triangle trading. This will lead everybody of the industry, every other part of the industry, to optimize. For instance, the owner will have to get the best ship performance-wise, so that he will be preferred to get the employment. The ports will get organized, will make the infrastructure to accept the optimized ships. It will have infrastructure to use AMPs. For those who don't know the termination, the term, this is the infrastructure where when the ship comes into the port, he plugs on and he goes on electrical power, so zero emissions, and so on. So I think in the circumstances of shipping and aeroplane, what we should do, aviation, what we should do is optimize. I don't know of any new energy. If anybody knows of a new energy to be used for propulsion in ships and airplanes, let him speak.
Thank you. Well, indeed, optimization and efficiency are important issues that we should consider when we will, let's say, formulate a basket of measures. I would now like to turn to the European Parliament, to Mrs. Adamovich. We all know that the views of the European Parliament are loud and clear, but I also like to use basically what you mentioned in your introductory statement, that we need a comprehensive impact assessment, that this is not a silver bullet, so and that the shipping industry needs certainty. So what would you like to see in this, let's say, legislative process in order to be assured that what the European Commission will put on the table will be effective enough to meet the goal, which is the meaningful contribution to climate change? The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have some problem with hearing you, so I'm using two devices to have the good quality of listening. So thank you for your interventions, opinions, and advices. And I agree with my previous speakers that one of the most important questions that we will need to answer concern the scope, as it was said, of the inclusion of shipping in ETS. The question is, should it be limited only to intra-European traffic and exclude international maritime transport? Well, of course, we need to draw conclusion from the EU attempts to include international aviation in the ETS. It was a very long and problematic process, especially that our partners were not enthusiastic about these attempts. So I think we need to make sure that the inclusion of the shipping in the ETS will not lead to political tensions or trade disputes with third countries. And now, when I come to say a few comments, on the question 2, indeed, we need to address effectively the risk of carbon leakage in the case of the inclusion of the shipping in the ETS. This could result in increasing emissions from shipping outside the scope of the EU ETS and leading to the market distortion. It is also a very problematic issue for EU ports and ports that are in the direct neighborhood and competition of non-EU ports. So one of the solutions is this problem could be to foresee and allocation of a free emission allowance, as it is done for certain industrial ETS sectors, particularly threatened by carbon leakage. Of course, this solution would need to be further investigated and then regulated. So this is how it should lie, I mean, in my opinion. Thank you.
Many thanks. Very, very useful statement. So I would like to turn to the lady that has the right of initiative, Mrs. De La Torre from the European Commission. Okay, Mrs. De La Torre, you've heard all these messages from different, let's say, angles, from NGOs, from ship owners, from the European Parliament about the regulated entity, the geographical scope, the shape of this ETS. So with all these approaches, what is your view? Of course, I know we are in the framework of the public consultation, and there is not a clear yes or no, but it is important to have your comment about these 3 points, and how do you see the way forward?
Thank you very much indeed. As this is extremely useful for us, because it's not an easy one. If it was an easy, we would have the replies, and you rightly say, Minister, we are shaping the proposal in this moment. We have to think of the pricing. The pricing of a carbon can work in different ways, and members of this panel have been mentioning that. So we can have an open ETS, and there the maritime, we include the maritime directly in the general ETS system. Or we can have a separate ETS where we'll be covering, and it will be working alone on its own, the ETS for maritime. Or, as some of you have mentioned, we could have a tax on the emissions, which as an alternative to the ETS, or a combination of pricing, whether it's a tax or ETS, with other measures, which I think it's the way we are going, and many of you have mentioned that, explicit operational measures, efficiency measures, and things like this. An open ETS will give the maritime sector access to cheaper abatement opportunities in other sectors, because as we're saying, it's when we have a whole market, then the market will choose the most efficient solutions to diminish emissions. This can mean that the reduction in emissions would not happen in the maritime. So in contrast to that, a closed sector, perhaps in terms of cost efficiency of the overall reduction of emissions, is less good, but on the other hand, it will ensure that the reduction of emissions will happen in the sector. On the tax, our thinking is, okay, the tax is a way of pricing the emissions. Now, if we put the tax, and I hear well some of you talking about the predictability of the costs. Yes, I understand that very well. On the other hand, if we have a fixed tax and we know what's going to be, then how do we, I mean, with the tax, we cannot reduce the cap of emissions, because as we know, the principle of ETS is a cap and trading system. Therefore, with the tax, that's much more difficult. In terms of yes, I understand that this has an impact. This might have an impact on trade, but we have seen that in a study which was carried out years ago, and which will of course update, we saw that the incidence in the price of the commodities is nearly negligible if we had an ETS system. it is less than the normal fluctuations of commodities in a market. So this gives in the certainty avenue, this gives some reassurance. There are a number of principles and key design options that you've mentioned, most of them, and that we all share, is that we are, of course, attached to the neutrality of the flag neutrality, and will have equal treatment on a route basis and a level playing field, because it is clearly the Commission's intention with whatever proposal we come with is to preserve the competitiveness of the European sector. This links very well, as you've all been saying, on the geographical scope. And then you've seen that in the Commission plan, we have said that we will include anyhow the intra-EU. Mrs. Amadovic reminded us rightly of the discussions that took place when introducing ETS in the aviation. So we are again coming back with this question: shall we introduce extra-European, inbound, outbound, half of them? This is something that we are working on. And certainly, as she was saying, we have to avoid carbon leakage. Some of you have also referred to administrative burden, and we are very mindful of that, knowing that it is a sector which has very different, with actors with very different characteristics, and many of them are small, so undue burden should not happen. And this will determine a number of things. For example, whether we cover CO2 only or CO2 and others. CO2 represents 98% of the emissions, so perhaps the reply is nearly there. On the types of ships covered, there are pros and cons, doing like MRV or not doing like MRV. And anyhow, that's also a principle which is non-negotiable for us, in agreement with you all, is that this has to be done in the context of global measures. So this, whatever the ETS proposal will be, it will not contradict, it will not, it will not prevent measures to be taken as well at global level. So the regional measures, and we have seen that in many, in aviation, we have the region, the European Union usually, undertaking more efforts to decarbonize the sector, has brought other parts of the world or the global community as a whole to embark on higher ambition schemes. So this is also one of the reasons why we are so keen in going on with the ambition. And the last comment, if you allow me, Minister, is the proportionality principle. You were saying, how does it affect? And indeed, in our analysis, as in every proposal of the Commission, we are careful of not inducing undue harm or undue benefit to parties, to different parties, by via the initiative, the means that is being proposed. And certainly we are very, very aware in that respect of what are the particularities of island countries or peripheral regions or something at the same time. Thank you.
Many thanks. Very useful clarifications from the Commission side. The technical team here, the chat room, they signaled to me that they have a number of questions from our viewers. So you will see in seconds some of the questions appearing on the screen. And of course, please feel free to respond. Let's see the nature of the question. And we will see who is to whom is addressed. So let's have the first question on the screen, please. Okay, we have a question here. What are Panelist's views on true consequences of LNG as fuel, considering its full life cycle, well to wake, and the detrimental effect of methane as a greenhouse gas? Should shipping endorse it going forward? So who would like to answer from our panelists? Open the window. Can you open the window, please, so we can see all the panelists?
Can I?
So, who would like to respond to this question?
Yeah,
Mr.
I would.
Hadjiani.
Okay.
So let's take it, but be very quick on that. So I will give the floor first to Mr. Hadjianis.
Okay, thank you. According to IMO, LNG does have reduced CO2 emissions compared to the heavy fuel. It's 3.1 versus 2.75. But taking into account the energy density, it comes to about the same. So I don't understand why should anybody go to the length of changing the diesel engine into an LNG engine. I may be mistaken. I'm not a scientist, but this is what IMO says. So I see no reason.
Okay, let me clarify that in each question I will allow one ship owner and one NGO, and from the regulator side, feel free also to intervene. But because we will receive a lot of questions, in order to give the opportunity to respond to as many as possible, so I will give now the floor to Dr. Abbasov from the NGO side to respond to this question.
Many thanks. For us, the answer is very simple. LNG reduces CO2 emissions, but LNG also causes methane, which is a greenhouse gas emissions more powerful than CO2 itself. The net effect of CO2 and methane together actually causes more greenhouse gases than compared to marine diesel oil or heavy fuel oil. In that sense, LNG is the cure worse than the disease, and we do not recommend the regulator promoting LNG in maritime sector.
Okay, any response from the regulators? Mrs. Adamovich, yes.
Yes, so we currently observing a very dynamic okay, sorry, because there is, okay. We are currently observing a very dynamic development of alternative fuels for ships. However, it is difficult to foresee which technology will prove to be the most optimal in the long term. So many of the promising technologies are still in the testing phase, and that is why we need a flexible approach based on the principle of technological neutrality. Thank you.
Okay, can I have the second question, please, on the screen? So, CO2 in shipping were reducing the last 10 years because research and development stimulated serious improvements. Efficiency is a key for shippers to be competitive, and a regional ETS is an ordinary tax unless the proceeds are used for research and development to decarbonize shipping. Please comment. Can I have the view of a ship owner first? Oh, let's have the regulator first to intervene. Mrs. De La Torre, your turn now.
Thank you. I can wait. No problem with that. Is that
no.
I have mentioned that indeed currently it is foreseen that part of the revenues coming from the ETS is going member states. They have to use at least 50% of them for clean technologies, and they are using more, 80%. And we have also an innovation fund, which is precisely there to deploy technologies, clean technologies in whatever field. So this is a feature which is already embedded in ETS. So, as you know, Grand Horizon Europe, where a specific partnership, public-private, is being set up in the maritime sector precisely to develop more technologies which are cleaner, more efficient, and more sustainable. So it is a feature which is well embedded in union policies.
Okay, can I have the views of from a ship owner? I see Mr. Phillips asking for the floor. Yes.
Okay. Can you put again, Minister, the question?
Can you put on the screen the question again?
Okay.
Yes.
I think it's true that the shipping industry maybe is the only industry that worked over the last year towards decarbonization and using new electronic engines, a lot of energy efficiency devices, different type of energy efficiency devices. That's the optimization of the hub, optimization of the accommodation, the power optimization within the engine room, manage to reduce the carbon intensity by 30%. And I don't believe there's any other industry that managed to do so. And this is very important that the ship owners from the very beginning, they spend and invest money towards that direction. And I believe that any additional, any market-based measure should contribute towards the required issue, which is alternative fuels. And this requires a lot of money in the research and development, and the ship owners are able, they are ready to accommodate any new technology that will be given. We cannot do anything else.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'd like to ask Mrs. De La Torre to expand a bit on the alternative fuels she has mentioned. What alternative fuels do you think is compatible to shipping and to shipping engines?
We have, as you know, we have different activities dealing with the different fuels. We have the research activities, we have the program activities, and we have precisely the initiative which is being built. You cannot hear me well?
Yeah, can you speak a little bit up? Yes.
Okay, so as I was saying, we have different strands of work for the fuels. We are doing research for alternative fuels and decarbonized fuels. We are also preparing an initiative, the initiative that I'm sure you know, the maritime fuel, precisely to promote the uptake of cleaner fuels. But as Mrs. Adamovich was saying, we as regulators want to leave all options open. We want to be technology neutral. So it's up to the research and development measures to lead us from the way. So we have gases, but we have the hydrogen, we have the electrification. So we have the e-fuels. So all this panel should be left open and up to you, those that are the consumers of that fuel, and up to those that are doing research and development to do the way. As in many sectors, there will be seldom. I mean, there is usually no single reply. There is always a combination. I mean, for short shipping, short distance shipping, it is or inland waterborne. The solutions are not the same as for long haul shipping. So the technologically neutrality, the neutrality. I'm mixing it up. The technology neutrality of the regulator should be there. Apologies.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a good answer. But I'm sure we will agree that unless such technology is in place, all right, and it's applicable to shipping, we should not put the blame on the ship owners or on the ship. Yes?
If you allow me, Chair, Minister,
Andreas, you can call me Andreas.
one thing that I would like that we go home with, this is not a question of punishing anyone.
No.
It is a question of all of us together finding the best way out to honor our commitments for climate emission. That's
okay. Thank you. Let me have the next question on the screen, please. So, from Andreas Chrysostomo, how can we make sure that any regional measure will not really affect or go in contrast to the global debate, IMO's deliberations? So I would like to give the floor, I think, first to one of our NGOs. Dr. Abbasov, do you like to comment this?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good question, pertinent one. What I would say right off the bat is that there is no evidence that any regional measure has ever undermined the international process. Quite the opposite. We have seen that the EU MRV, adoption of the EU MRV was the reason that IMO adopted the data collection system. We know that regions, not only Europe, regions moving in first on sulfur regulations helped IMO deliver 0.5% global sulfur cap. And there are many other examples. Madame de la Torre also mentioned that EU acting on aviation emissions actually led the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is this organization to the IMO, also adopt a global CORSIA system, which is not as ambitious as the EU-ETS, unfortunately. So in that sense, EU is actually leading the way as opposed to replacing. In that sense, we need to see EU as complementary as opposed to replacement. The size of the problem that we are facing with the climate change is so immense that we cannot have the luxury of limiting ourselves to one, regional or global. We need to have them both and make sure that they complement each other as opposed to replace.
Captain Hartmann, would you like to comment on this question?
Sorry, I want to comment on the LNG because I disagree. The LNG is for sure on the onboard use, if you have the right system, much cleaner than any other fossil fuel oils, because there's 20% CO2 reduction, there's no sulfur, there's NOx, it's almost the same, it's oil reduction, but there are no particles. And if you use a diesel engine with a diesel principle, not a diesel engine with an auto principle, the technicians know what the difference is, then there's no miss and slip. And that is the same with electricity. The electricity in use is clean, but it's also the question where the electricity is coming from. If it comes from a coal power station, then it's not very clean. Then it's clean by the end user. So we have to difference between the end user and the way how to come. And I believe very much, of course, as I said in my statement, we have to decarbonize, but we have to find a way how we do it. And this is very important for me. There is research, and we work already on that with ammonia, for instance. But ammonia, to be honest, is extremely poison. If you have hydrogen, needs a lot of energy, and it works only if it is a green energy. So even in Germany, we have many wind power stations. So we have to use them all to produce hydrogen, but then there's not enough electricity for any other kind of use. So it's a debate, and it's a very interesting debate, and it's very important. I agree very much with you, Mr. Abbasov, that we have to do something. The time is running, but we have to find the good ways, and we have to think really what is the best way to decarbonize as soon as possible. That must be our target, not how to create new fees.
Thank you. We will take 2 more questions. Can I have the next one, please, on the screen? So the next question is, do the panelists agree that if just short sea shipping is inside the scope of EU-ETS, the revenue should be mainly beneficial to the short sea sector instead of the deep sea sector? I would like to have the view of Mr. Feliz now on this.
Thank you, Minister. I cannot understand clearly the question, but I think if the R&D is developing alternative fuels, would be for the benefit of all shipping. If you are developing new efficiency devices, energy efficient devices, this would be for the benefit of the entire shipping. I don't see how you separate these two issues. The only thing that I may think it's valid is whenever there will be incentives for the local shipping industry or the intra-Europe shipping industry to decarbonize or using alternative fuels because of the short distance, like hydrogen or electric-driven ships or even ammonia. This might be a reason why to differentiate the two sectors. Otherwise, I think any development towards alternative fuels and new propulsion systems will benefit the entire ship.
Like to any other panelists would like to comment on this question? Dr. Abbasov.
Well, thank you very much. Just to briefly, I do agree with Mr. Phillips that if as a result of ETS or its proceeds that lead to research and development, if new fuels or new technologies are further developed and deployed, that will be benefit to everyone. And it will be very difficult, practically speaking, to prevent or forbid deep sea shipping from taking advantage of it. But that is the principle that we need to bear in mind when designing it. Because if we include only intra-EU shipping, then the burden, the financial burden of development and deployment of those fuels, at least in the first, at early stages, will fall on short sea shipping. And we believe that that would be unfair from the short sea shipping perspective. Therefore, however we design it, we have to make sure that at least part of the extra EU shipping, whether it's inbound, whether it's outbound, or whether it's 50-50, is also included in the system to make sure that the burden is equally shared between short sea shipping and deep sea shipping.
Thank you. And let's have on the screen now the final question, please. So, what do panelists think on the possible impact of the EU ETS on transshipment activity in Southern Europe, especially considering that transshipment activity can move away to not pay emission rights? Who would like to respond to this question? Mrs. Adamowicz?
I can. Yes. So as for free allocation, in case of energy intensive sector, it has been a solution in order to address carbon leakage. So as for the shipping, we would need to consider what kind of measures could be introduced to address carbon leakage. We need to look for a right solution.
Okay, who would like to respond? I think the question is also about the modal backshift. The fear that we might move into less environmentally friendly modes of transport. So who would like to respond on this? Dr. Abbasov again. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I feel like I am monopolizing among the NGOs this conversation, but I have a lot to say. Well, first of all, 2013 impact assessment by the European Commission, to which Madame Delatore already alluded to, has already looked into this, and I understand the new impact assessment is looking to the chances of the risk of carbon leakage by ships calling at third countries is very low. And I would like to also mention that my organization will be publishing a brand new study on this one next week. I'm looking forward to comments coming from the industry on this. One thing is also important, Mr. Dimitriadis also mentioned, modal backship, meaning that from ship back to road. Under the ETS, ships will be paying 7 times less carbon price than the trucks are paying today using diesel taxes. For example, in Cyprus, trucks, when they buy diesel, they pay about 150 euros per ton of CO2 equivalent in diesel taxes. Shipping CO2 price today is 25 euros, maximum 30 euros. In that sense, road transportation is already paying much higher carbon price than shipping will be, which reduces any risk of modal backshift to the road.
Okay, it seems that from the controller, they signal to me that we do have a lot of questions. I don't know if we can borrow another 10 minutes of your time just to take 1 or 2 more questions, because although the understanding is at the end, I will share the questions and comments with everybody after the debate. But okay, let's take another question, please. A final one. Okay, it seems that there is a problem with this question, but okay, just what I would like to do is to give the opportunity for all the panelists for 1 minute closing, and I will give the floor first to Dr. Loizidou for that. So 1 minute closing remark, please.
Yes, what we've seen until from all this discussion is that more discussion is needed, and there are several issues that they are to be debated. I would like, for example, to speak about LNG, which is something very important. So there are still basic issues to solve concerning how to deal with shipping and ETS. I want to repeat that we are in the midst of a fundamental transformation of societies and economies, and this is what is vital, and what is at stake is to be as soon as possible carbon neutral. So this is the target, and we should have different kind of options. ETS is an option, a basket of measures is a better option, strong partnerships, optimum roadmap, actions, effective tools in place, funding for R&D and innovation, and accommodate diversity of European regions and communities. And I believe this is the elixir for sustainability.
Captain Hartmann, can I have your concluding remarks, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, it was a very interesting discussion today, and I learned a lot out of that. But I would say whatever we do, we should do it internationally, because shipping is an international business. So we need the IMO to make new regulations and to bring the carbon emissions down as much as possible, because the carbon emissions are not stopped at the European borders. It's a worldwide issue, and in more and more countries, they realize that they have to do something. Also, the United States now, with the EU government, hopefully they realize how important it is. So we should concentrate more on IMO, and we should, if IMO is not fast enough, or if we believe they are too slow, okay, then as Europeans, we can make more pressure. And this is something we should think about. Thank you.
Many thanks. Dr. Abbasov, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. I think it's fair to recognize the shipping industry has come a long way in recognizing their impact on climate change. A few years ago, if you ask shipping industry, they would say they're part of the solution, not a problem, and that's why nobody should have touched them. But look, we have initial strategy from the IMO, and we have already shipping companies, individual shipping companies and associations, expressing their discontent with the progress at the IMO, and even saying now EU measures are inevitable. On top of this, we have the European Green Deal by the European Commission, a strong message from the European Parliament, but above all, strong message from the European society that they see climate change as one of the biggest problems of the modern era, and that needs to be tackled as soon as possible. Now here we are. We have an opportunity with the European Green Deal. ETS is part of it. It's not the only one. Shipping industry could either deny themselves a chance to be part of the solution by constantly rejecting a European action, or they could be part of the solution and help design it in a way that fits the purpose, that reduces the burden, and also helps to channel the revenues and funds to research and development and deployment of technology. I would, on behalf of the environmental organizations, call industry to be part of the process and help us design it in a way that's useful. Thank you.
Mr. Feliz, your comments, please.
Thank you, Minister. I think the existing implementation of ETS on land-based industry shows that has not contributed to the reduction of greenhouse gases. Why could this be possible for the maritime sector? There is no evidence how ETS will contribute towards decarbonisation, and specifically, not all the money collected will be returned to the industry. How this will work. Additionally, a levy system associated with an R&D fund having a fixed price for the predictability for a certain period may be the only reasonable measure. And of course, a similar system might be aligned with the IMO, and IMO is not considering any ETS whatsoever. So it focuses on reducing the carbon intensity with the short-term measures that have been approved at the last MEPC. And this might be also the guidelines to the regulators how to act towards this direction.
Thank you. Mr. Hadjiyannis,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thank you. In that, I fully agree with ETS. But that has to go as long as reducing ETS emissions in shipping. So the regulators must first identify how we can reduce emissions in shipping. In my analysis, the only way is by optimizing the transportation, optimizing the transportation. There is no other technology that can materially affect the shipping emissions. Maybe a decimal point of a decimal point, but not substantially. Optimization, however, as I explained before, it can go as far, in excess of 50%. It's been wasted. So the regulators must first identify how we reduce it and where do we address it. To my opinion, it has to go to the mind that controls the transportation, not to the mind that follows the orders of the transporter. And this is very easy for the European Union, as I said before, because they have the importer and the exporter who can take a big role in the organization of the transportation.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, God helps. We have a new energy, a new renewable energy that can be used to ships. We can talk again. But I think this is simply a fair tale story today. Thank you.
Many thanks. I will now would like to turn to the regulators. First to Mr. Ketis, by thanking him and his office, the European Parliament's office in Cyprus, for supporting this event, for his concluding remarks. Mr. Ketis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Minister. Of course, special thanks to the honourable member from Poland, and it's very important for us as Office of the European Parliament in Cyprus to welcome Mrs. Adamovic in this important debate, and it was very interesting to hear her views about the issue. What I would like to say from my part is that we have to all realize how revolutionary the Green Deal is, and I'm sure the shipping industry, the ship owners are pragmatic people and can understand that they will all have to contribute to make this target possible. And of course, I leave the political closing to Mrs. Adamovic.
And before going to Mrs. Adamovic, I would now like to turn to the lady that holds the pen, Mrs. Clara de la Torre for her final remarks on this debate.
Thank you, Minister. That's too much of a responsibility you're putting on us, but indeed, colleagues, the Commission is writing the proposal. If the European Union, the European Union was up of its ambition to climate policy, we all know, we all share the idea that every has to contribute to this endeavor. And rest be assured that all your comments today and those that you will be sending to us will help us in, I'm sure, finding a solution in a global context and with other measures that we will fine-tune all this so that we have the most effective measure in all respects. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Many thanks. And now I turn to Mrs. Adamovich for her closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. Last but not least, I would like to thank the Deputy Shipping Minister for the organizing of the debate and all the panelists for their very interesting contributions. I hope we will continue our reflection on how to green the European shipping with the involvement of all stakeholders. So it is very important that all the actors will take active part in this process. Of course, decarbonization is a significant challenge for the maritime transport. However, only thanks to the contribution from all the sectors of the economy, we can effectively reduce greenhouse gas emission in Europe and achieve climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest, as we have planned in a Green Deal. Thank you very much, and I hope see with you face to face soon. Take care for the Christmas and happy holiday. Thank you.
Many thanks. Well, to conclude, I must say that it has been a constructive discussion. I have no doubt that it will continue during the weeks and months to come, but for now we must draw this session, of course, to a close. I would like to thank the panelists for their time and insights. Thanks also to all of you who have joined us and contributed through the Cyprus Shipping Deputy Ministry's website or one of our social media channels. The European Commission's public consultation closes on 5th of February, and I hope that the output of today's session proves useful in helping to inform the direction of the proposed legislative initiative. We set out to explore if the EU's proposed emission trading scheme for shipping is an elixir or threat to shipping. While understandably there remain strong views on both sides of the argument, it seems to me that today's discussion might be best summarized by the following points. First, shipping should have a meaningful contribution to climate change. It is uncertain to what level the EU-ETS will be effective in further reducing greenhouse gas emissions from ships. As combating climate change knows no borders, and considering the international nature of shipping, IMO seems to be the appropriate body to regulate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships. The EU-ETS should not encourage a modal backshift to less environmentally friendly modes of transport. Certainty is a vital element for the shipping sector's operational sustainability. In this respect, the EU-ETS should clearly specify the geographic scope of application, clearly define each entity's obligation, allow the trading of the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions within the sector, and fund research and innovation towards developing alternative fuels and carbon-neutral technologies. And, of course, any scheme aiming at the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships introduced by the EU must be compatible and scalable with what the IMO may introduce in the future. All comments, remarks, and questions received by the audience, as well as a summary of today's discussion, will be forwarded to the regulators and will be shared with all of you. What remains crystal clear is the ongoing need for collaboration and cooperation between regulators, the shipping industry, and NGOs. I believe that we all want a better, safer, smarter, more sustainable future for shipping. We all recognize the need to play our part in making a positive difference. Our sector is in a period of profound transformation, and only by working together we will be able to find the right balance between environmental progress and safeguarding competitiveness. In pursuing the right course of action to achieve this, a collective focus on sustainability in every sense of word is critical. Thank you all. Good night.